So I find that what labels me as disabled is society. The barriers that get put up or don't get removed are what disables me.
Hi, this is Frank Schaeffer, and you are watching and or listening to my podcast, In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. And today I am talking with the author of a book called Rough Waters, and that's Heather C. Markham. And I'm going to introduce her properly and do all the stuff you're supposed to do and say that Heather is an engineer, an assistive technology professor, public speaker, competitive parasurfer, educator, ADA, architectural barriers specialist. I was about to say socialist, but I misread it. Award-winning international photographer. And in reading your book, Heather, facetiously, I was saying, well, she must be related to Tom Cruise because the level of energy you've got in here, it's like, yes, she does her own stunts. And I was really left gobsmacked because not only is it a very good read and a lovely book, but the diversity of your life in terms of your experiences, what you have done, what you've been through, I don't even know where to start. So I'm going to start somewhere that's close to my own territory and dive into some bits of the book that are far-flung and not sequential. I grew up in an evangelical fundamentalist family that I left and sort of fled. I notice references to the Bible here. I notice in one passage you're talking about someone that you were talking with, and where your mom's parents and their summer home on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. We'll get into that because I'm in Massachusetts. But there was something back here, that jumped out at me, where you were talking with somebody who, in spite of the fact you found out that she was a pastor's kid, which gave you pause, and I think her name was Faith. Is that correct?
Right. And she was a pastor's wife. Yeah.
Yeah, pastor's wife. So we've got a chapter called Faith, or a section called Faith, and then you're talking to a pastor's wife. And then that gave you pause because you were worried that maybe she would be judging you, because I think you were just coming out of your divorce at that point, or a separation.
I had been divorced. I had been married and divorced in my early 20s.
Right.
And when I'm talking, and I was talking to Faith, so I got divorced in 96 and I was talking to Faith in 2011.
Right.
There'd been this big separation of time, but I found her as a counselor and I was attending a church, and that's how I got to her.
Well, what drew my attention to it is you had early in the book, in the kind of, publisher's information at the front, you talk about your biblical quotes are taken from, I think, the New Standard Version or published by Crossway, whatever. And then you have her being a pastor's wife, and that gave you pause. And then you have certain references. Given my own background, and I know this is a crazy place to start an interview on Rough Waters, but let's dive in there. I'm just curious, your parents were in the military. Is that correct?
My dad was.
Your dad was. So you come from that background of moving around a lot. I just wondered if church was something consistently part of that life, and where you're kind of at in terms of your own faith issues now, having done all the things you've done and everything you've been through and all the life experience. I'm always interested in where people's journey is taking them, kind of a snapshot now. Because if I, for instance, talk about my own journey, it's like, well, do you mean when I was 20? Do you mean when I was 30? Do you mean when I was 40? I'm 71 now. Are you talking about 2 books ago? Because I'm not sure I agree with anything I said in that last book. I've changed. And so I'm always curious about the journey. And Rough Waters is the book about a journey, a life journey, a physical journey, a disability journey, surgeries, all sorts of stuff. So I think let's just start on the spirituality side and just see how that progressed, because I think that informs this book in some way that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm curious.
Thank you. So faith, church, and those are separate things.
Yes.
Those are very separate things. Going to church was not something that my family did. I had been a very, very angry teenager because of a lot of the things that I didn't have good coping skills 4.
Hmm.
And I ran into a group of kids in high school and was like, okay, well, why are you so calm? Like, I'm an angry person and I'm angry and I don't have any words to express it. And they're like, oh, what am I? And so I was crushing on a boy, high school, crushing on a boy. And he said, it's Jesus. And I was like, what are you talking about? Anyway, so I started going to church youth group. And I proclaimed faith in Jesus in high school, which then got me a ton of ridicule and absolutely ripped any sense of belonging I had in my family away. Because to them, now I was this horrific, awful creature, right? And so that was really a very painful kind of thing. But I was no longer angry. So that helped me a bunch. I floated in and out of church communities for a number of years. And there are a couple of quotes, and there are a couple of biblical quotes in the book. And I spent a lot of time in a church community. I'm not there now. I'm not in a church community now. I still have deep faith, but I don't fit comfortably into the patriarchal judging, sitting under it. All just rubs really raw. But I say I still have a deep faith, and the book certainly reflects a journey where I floated in and out of church communities, and there are still quotes that inform my life, biblical quotes that inform my life. One is about Balaam and the talking donkey. Okay, because I just find that hilarious. And I think of that as information from unexpected sources, right? Because someone will say something, you'll be like, where did that come from? Like, I have no idea. And the other one is about Moses being stuffed in a crevice, right? Because sometimes you're just put where you're not comfortable. Okay, and that could be for any number of reasons. And so I say I still have a deep faith, but I'm just not involved in a church community now, nor do I know if I will be again comfortably.
Yeah. Well,
there's still curious. Good teaching, right? I mean, there's still good information. So,
well, I was very curious about that. Another big thread through this book is not just dealing with illness and disability, but there was one passage in your book where you're talking about having, I believe, reconstructive surgery after a mastectomy and trying to fit yourself into a bra and all the rest. People talk to me about my books and say, you know, you sort of allow yourself to be vulnerable and you tell the truth as far as you can. But I must say, I found you're writing about your own, I guess you would call it, physical journey of illness and challenge, aside from the fact that, you know, the whole being in a wheelchair and access and all those subjects. So something I want to ask you before we get into what the book is about, which I'm going to unpack with you, because I want people who are listening to this to understand your work and that it's important. We've talked a little bit about the faith spiritual thing. Where does the, I guess, energy and confidence to be as direct and honest in describing your situation, whether it's the loss of your dog, trying to get a bra that fits you comfortably after a mastectomy? There's a rawness to your work, which I really like. I mean, in the good sense of the word, like it's unvarnished. You know, my question to you is, who are you that allows you to be that person and be so direct about these things in a way that I find just so attractive and so interesting in reading? You know, there's a character that comes through here, and it's someone that basically says, let the chips fall where they may. I'm going to say what actually happened. I'm going to say how I actually felt. And at the same time, there's a sentiment there and a sort of a spirituality of survival. So in no way is it cynical, but I just found that combination really unusual. Kind of tell all, say it, let the chips fall where they may. And at the same time, there's a sort of a thread running through the story that's very redemptive. And I'm just trying to understand who you are in terms of being an author, because I haven't met you, but I've read this. And so who's the person behind this book in that aspect of sort of blunt, brutal honesty and say it all, and at the same time puts that narrative thread in that says this is a book filled with hope and inspiration. It's an interesting combination.
Thank you very much. Well, the honesty and the directness is that, if you'll pardon the expression, my mother was a damn Yankee.
Yeah.
And my dad was military. And so there was no varnishing in our house. There was direct and suck it up and get over yourself. And we just talk, we didn't talk about stuff, because there's also that growing up, there's that shroud, right, of we're trying to present perfect. So, but behind the scenes, there was a lot of, and people have accused me of being not nice because I'm direct. And I just think it's important to, okay, sometimes I have problems with social niceties because I'm so direct, right? I just say stuff. But the hope factor is, because you just keep going. That's part of the military thing, right? Is you suck it up and you go. Embrace the suck. It's a weird phrase, but it's just like, you just keep going. There's no other option here. And so what I know is that the only thing that I have control of on a daily basis is my attitude, how I show up. And so I can either show up okay, right? Or I can be angry and sad, and that repels people, but I need a lot of help to do stuff. And if I'm radiating angry and just filled with rage rather than filled with hope, then the people aren't going to want to be around me. I managed to get myself dressed today, but that's not always the case. And so, it's easier to go through life hopeful. It's easier.
Yeah, we're going to look at the story that's told in the book in a second. Just going to reintroduce you. This is Heather Markham. I'm Frank Schaeffer, in conversation with Frank Schaeffer. We're talking about Heather's book, Rough Waters. And now if we can just backtrack a little bit, having kind of talked a little more philosophically in general terms, tell us about the book. I've read it, but I would like you to, I don't want to just recap what's in the book. I want you to take a few minutes with no sense of time or pressure. Tell me the story that Rough Waters tells in your words. And I know there's so many threads and there's so many levels of achievement in your life and so much drive that may be difficult to do, but without necessarily trying to follow the chapter structure, tell my podcast listeners and family your story, because it's a fascinating story and I want them to read Rough Waters, but I'd like to take advantage of having you sitting here, and I'd like you to tell us not just what this book is about. Forget the book for a minute. Tell us your story, because it's a big one.
Oh, it is a big one. And it's multi-threaded, right? Because we change all the time. And so it's a story of a gal who has an injury and struggles to be believed. And it's a story of a woman who is trying to survive, right? And is trying to understand what's happening to her. And how do you march through life when everything you know is disappearing, when everything that you understand how to do is changing on a daily basis? Because that's my lived experience, is that everything that I could do yesterday, I can't necessarily do today. And that may seem strange, but that's how a progressive muscular dystrophy works. But it's also a story of, I'm not going to let anything stop me if I want to go do it. I mean, surfing who takes up surfing after after they are put on a wheelchair permanently?
Hmm.
I mean, people just thought I was cuckoo, and I was like, I don't know, it's like fun. let's go do that because it looks fun. Can we figure out a way to do it? And so my whole life has been can we figure it out? Are you a part of my team? Do you want to be a part of my team to help me figure things out?
Hmm.
You know, and what does that look like? I don't know. Surfing has been a fantastic blast. And there's been a lot of loss, but I can't focus on the loss. I can only focus on that was cool. Okay. And how do you move and how do you transition through phases? How do you accept the loss of identity? Because we all have identities that we gain and we shed. Right? I'm a motherless daughter, right? Because my mom is gone. My dad is still here, but after my dad passes, will I still be a daughter? You know, I don't know. I'm no longer a person who walks. I'm no longer a violinist. These are identities that I've shed, but I continue to be a photographer. Does that kind of answer your question?
I think the part that I enjoy most about what you were just saying is this idea of shedding various identities and then finding maybe replacements for them or not. I guess the most interesting question that I would come back with is how in this journey of shedding identities because of physical issues and illness and MS, has that changed your own view of yourself in the sense of how do you identify, for instance, just as an example, I'm a writer. So I type and I look at a screen. If that was taken away from me, you know, how would I identify myself? And I think it brings up a larger point that I really want to ask you about, not rhetorically related to the book, but just person to person. It seems to me one of the biggest mistakes that our culture makes that really limits possibilities for people is in asking people what they do as in career and defining them by that rather than who are you? You know, so we talk to kids, we say, what do you want to do when you grow up? Rather than who do you want to be?
Right.
And I think one of the things that I take away from your book is that with all these stripped identities, these lost identities, you know, you're still there. And those identities, you know, playing the violin and walking did not identify you any more than being a professor or an ADA architectural barrier specialist identifies you. That's what you do, but in a way that's not important to who you are. So I'd like to cut through that, the lost identity, and say, what remains that never would go away? And has your own thinking about who you are been sharpened by the fact that these peripheral identities have been stripped away through circumstances beyond your control, but they happen to be the things that would define you in a bio? She plays the violin, she does this, she surfs, she does, you know, and as these things go away, or are threatened, how has that changed the way you see yourself in terms of, okay, well, now we're getting down to the essentials. So who's Heather Markham in her own head in the quiet of the morning when no one's around? How do you see yourself? Not the labels, but the actual person. I think that's the most interesting question for me that comes out of the book.
Wow, that is a great question that I've never been asked. So as I sit with the thought about that, I am joyful. I am hopeful. I am creative. I deeply love. I friend in a way. I am a friend in a way that if you need something, if I even think you need something, even if you haven't expressed that need, I'm going to try and fill it. This is how I friend. And it overwhelms some people because they're like, whoa, that's just way, you're doing way too much. I'm like, but this is how I friend. This is how I love. Let me show you who I am by connecting with you deeply. And those things will never be taken away from me. No matter how much I lose physically, my mind is still sharp. I'm a thinker. I'm a person who lives with a cat. That's who I am in the quiet of the morning, is those pieces. Not the, why can't I put on my glasses easily? I'm leaning on something. I don't know how much your video picks up, but otherwise, this becomes a much more awkward, and it's already awkward, right? But it becomes a much more awkward thing in order to just accomplish very small tasks.
Do you find, in looking back at that journey, that the person who you are now was always there, but the clutter of physical ability and achievement as measured by our culture around us actually obscured that person, and that now you are more clearly who you always were with less baggage?
In some instances, yes. I was,
for instance,
always
this ability to friend. Are you more aware of that now and how you behave? Or was that always something you were very conscious of doing, or has that become sharpened as this time has passed and other things have fallen away?
The way I have been a friend, the way I've friended with people has always been there. That has been a constant thread through my whole life. I'm more aware of my hopefulness. It was always very background. My creativity has become sharpened as I've needed to create new ways to create, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And so a lot of the labels, the work labels for sure, they are clutter. They're absolutely clutter. And I saw that with my grandfather when he no longer renewed his medical license. He was always Dr. Bick. I mean, that's who he was, but that's because that's what he did, right? And so the year he didn't renew his medical license, he kind of lost all of who he was. And that clutter for me has been stripped away already. And I'm 55. And so there has definitely been a sharpening and an awareness, as life becomes simpler.
I'm talking to Heather Markham, the author of Rough Waters, and we're in the middle of a discussion on the book. This is Frank Schaeffer with my podcast, In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. If you like it, please like it in the online sense, and become a Substack subscriber and follow all our various iterations out there in whatever it is out there in the ozone layer that's happening today, all our various places. By the way, we are going to put, when we put this up, Heather, there will be links to whatever you want Ernie, our redoubtable producer, to link to, so people can get in touch with you or find the book or whatever else. So we don't have to mention that, because that'll be posted everywhere this is posted. So I'd like to get back to the subject of the book. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think for people to fully understand this, and it'll be easier coming from you, give us the sort of markers of the falling away, as in the MS and the breast cancer, and you're in a wheelchair. What are the big dates in this war? And the war was declared on one date. This is when you found this out. This is when you found that out. Here's when you had your surgery. Just give us a thumbnail timeline so people understand the person sitting here talking to me, in the position you're in, and sort of dates too, because you were saying you're 55 now.
I am 55 now, yeah.
So when did it unroll? When did Heather Markham suddenly realize things were going to be different? And just what's that progression? What's your medical history, to put it that way?
Sure. So I was born in 67. I was born at the Air Force Academy, so born into this very military family. I became injured in college at the age of 22. I injured my back. And for me, that set up an entire cascade of things. And a lot of medical professionals who were chasing a back injury because I was injured at work. And so I had work comp doctors who over time would say, well, we can see something is going on with your calf muscles and that they're wasting away, not at the same rate, but it can't have anything to do with your back. And I ended up going to I had graduated from Texas A&M with a bachelor's in elementary education and did not teach. I rambled around through a lot of jobs that didn't provide health insurance, and ended up going back to graduate school in 1997 for computer science. And after that, I taught college in Oklahoma for a year and landed at Edwards Air Force Base in 2002 as an electronic warfare engineer. And it was in 2002 that I became diagnosed with a muscular dystrophy. And the muscular dystrophy didn't have a label at the time. It was just a limb girdle muscular dystrophy. It's going to take out your hips and your shoulders, and here's the pamphlet that says 20 years after onset, you'll probably need a wheelchair and it'll become tough to do things like brush your hair. So I started doing the math. Onset in 1990, it's now 2000, it's now 2002. So I'm now 12 years into this. This means I have 8 years left before I'm going to be sitting on a wheelchair. I'd never seen anybody who's not on a wheelchair except for one guy on base who was paralyzed. And I watched him do things and I was horrified by the fact that he would hold a water bottle with his hands and use his teeth to open the bottle. I mean, I literally sat and cried the first day I saw him do that as I overlaid that onto my own life at the age of 34. And I stayed at Edwards for a while and learned about assistive technologies. I had a cane. And it was in 2007 that I went to a conference for assistive technology, learned more about it, and went, oh, this is what I really need to be doing with my life. Maybe I can help one person. If I can just help one person, that's all I want to do. I want to learn about this assistive technology and help one person. So I went off to graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh. And I landed there in January of 2008. I received my first wheelchair. So the math then became really early. Had just turned 41. I just turned 40 actually, because it was January of 2008. And so here I'm 40 years old, living in Pittsburgh and sitting on a power chair, which I knew nothing about, and trying to figure out how to navigate the world. How do you open a door sitting on a power chair when there are no push buttons? How do you deal with snow on a wheelchair? I'd come out of Southern California. My dad was like, why are you moving to Pittsburgh? I was like, follow the money, Dad. It's graduate school. You always have to follow the money. And so then all of these other things started happening. I left graduate. I finished a graduate degree. I moved to the University of Kentucky to work for them as an assistive technology specialist, which is fantastic. And that was in September of 2011. I'd been published a couple of times in rehabilitation robotics and gone off to do this thing in Kentucky. And in 2000 and then a whole bunch of surgeries and things started happening. My mom died in 2014. I had breast cancer in 2015. In 2016, I broke my hip falling out of bed, which made me angry because I wasn't yet 50. And I'm like, that's an old lady injury. What's up with that? How could I possibly break my hip? And my service dog had just died. It was a lot, and all just kind of bam, bam, bam. Like, what am I supposed to do here? Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to sit and we're going to let it cry out, and we're going to breathe. And as a woman, having a mastectomy strips away everything that I was told about what being a woman meant. It stripped away all my femininity. It stripped away my sexuality, and it was horrifying. And how do you deal with that? I actually sat home and cried and proclaimed I was never leaving my house again. I'm a monster. I'm disfigured. No one could possibly want to look at me. And it took a while, months. And I went back to work, and I was like, okay, I cannot make this prosthetic work. I'm just going to go flat on that side. And if y'all don't want to look at me, that's your problem. Okay. And that might seem kind of harsh, but it's that Yankee attitude, right? That's like, this is not my problem. This is your problem. Also kind of a dancing with wolves philosophy, right? She's the one who's crying. You're the one with the problem. So all of these things happen in really fast succession. And then I was challenged to go surfing in Hawaii and compete. And that didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to either. But just keep going. I don't know.
A question that relates to one we talked about earlier in terms of faith, sort of a different kind of faith. Other than the fact that you come from the military family and just keep going and stand up again and all the rest of it, you know, as you look at the world around you, having gone through what you've gone through and sorted through and are still involved with, it would seem to me, and I'd just like to get your impression of this, that a lot of the more petty concerns that we all have and that people around you have who are not facing as much, again, with the emphasis on career or achievement or, you know, labels or whatever, it would seem to me, I mean, I don't want to assume anything, but just having read the book and talking to you here, that the kind of clarity and purity of your vision, having had these other things stripped away, as it were, you know, I would guess that you're someone who, if we were close friends, that I would be able to go to and say, well, how do you see this? Trusting the fact that you would see things quite clearly because of what's not there, and that, you know, the pettiness of concern and ambition. I mean, you're a high achiever, but I don't, you know, I would like to pick your brains on just how you see our culture in its contemporary setting of, you know, high achieving individuals sort of becoming billionaires and, you know, running the world on one hand, this idea of achievement and how we've kind of dressed it up always in terms of career and income or position or labels, you know, fame for fame's sake and so forth. It would seem to me that you'd make a good cultural observer, kind of a litmus test of, okay, is this authentic? What should we take seriously? What is bullshit? What is real? You know, you have all these online influencers and so forth. And it just seems to me that there's a lot of froth and a lot of pettiness in our culture that must quietly drive you crazy sitting there, because you've seen the real thing that life is. Your struggles are real. You know, this is not psychobabble BS. This is not self-pity. This is not all those things everybody's talking about 90% of the time. You know, I'm sitting here talking to you, looking at you, reading your book, and then, you know, we're assaulted on all sides by a kind of an avalanche of petty concern. I just am interested how you see everything around you in terms of that constant noise coming in from everywhere about who we're meant to be, what we're meant to look like, that whole thing. And you seem to be the opposite on all fronts. And I'm just curious whether you ever sit there looking at your own situation or how you're seeing the world and how that's developed, say, over the last 25, 30 years.
So I will tell you that I don't have a lot of time. I don't give a lot of time or a lot of thought or a lot of space to all of the frivolous nonsense. I don't have time in my world. I don't give time to other people's invented drama.
Good term.
But people don't understand it. And that was some of the reason that I was labeled as not nice.
Yeah.
Is that I don't have time to sit and listen to you. If you're not a close friend, okay, if you're a close friend, I have all the time in the world for everything that comes out of your mouth. And if you want my input, I'll give it to you.
Mm.
Okay. We get to decide up front how much I'm going to tell you. But I do have a lot of clarity about things. I had a really good friend, and she was like, "Oh, but I missed this guy, and he was awesome, and I'm just so lonely, and I just miss him." And I said, "Isn't this the guy you took a restraining order out on?"
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh yeah, I'd forgotten." I'm like, "Okay, then that's my job, is to remind you that you took a restraining order out on that guy." And another friend who said, "Oh, and I was involved with this, and my husband turned out to be narcissistic, and the woman who swooped in," she said, and that woman has never apologized to me. I said, "Why would she? Because in her mind, you're the bad guy."
Mm.
So I do have a lot of clarity about some things. But as far as all of the frivolous influencer noise, I just don't give it any space. People who invent challenges don't understand that I live alone. I'm still able to live alone, and things take me a lot of time and a lot of energy. And my world is about energy conservation. Okay, it takes me 7 actual clocked minutes to get out of bed. 7 minutes. That's a long time. And it can take me 20 minutes to just do a simple thing like put a dress on, just to pull on over my head dress. That's a long time and a lot of energy. And so because of that, my circle that I let in is very small. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Hey, by the way, in passing, just one little thing I need to correct. I mistakenly said MS earlier. I should have said MD. I have a friend who has MS, so it was just tripped off the tongue. If you noticed it, I apologize, but I got it wrong. It's MD, not MS. But let me get back.
The end game looks the same, kind of at this point.
Yeah, sadly. I want to get back to something you said. I wrote this down. I've got it now written on the back of your book, so I'll remember where it came from. I love the idea of invented drama. I just think that's such a good way to describe so much of what's happening out there in terms of people's lives, and just, how we look for meaning in these struggles that actually aren't really struggles and are just par for the course, because you're in real struggles. And I think a lot of us out there are not.
I don't discount your experience, though.
Yeah.
You are having your experience, and you are entitled to have your experience, and I'm going to give you the space to have your experience. My nephew and my dad and my nephew and I were all sitting together. Okay, I had a brother I grew up with who committed suicide, but had been married and had a young son at the time. And the three of us were sitting around talking, and my nephew said, "And my crippling ADD." And when he had left, my dad said to me, "Is his ADD really crippling?" I said, "It is. It is to him if it is to him. It's crippling for him if he sees it as crippling."
Right.
And so you don't get to discount his experience because it's not your experience.
Yeah.
And so you get to have the experience you're having, and I'm going to honor that for you, because it's important that I honor the space to let you feel and see and think what you're going through,
Yeah.
even if it's not the labels that I would choose for the same experience for myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes very good sense. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Yeah, it makes a terrific amount of sense. Let me change subjects here a little bit and just talk about your day. You alluded to 7 minutes to get out of bed, and it can take you the X amount of time to put on a dress. Take us through where you're at in terms of just that aspect of life. You have a cat now, you lost your dog. How old's the cat, by the way?
I inherited her from my mom.
Okay.
And so my mom has been gone for 9 years, and the cat was at least 2. So when people ask me how old she is,
You don't know.
I flippantly say somewhere between 11 and dead.
Yeah.
Because
11 and dead. Yeah.
I don't know the answer. The vet doesn't know. She has a thyroid condition. We put her on special food.
Yeah.
You know, I'm doing what I can to keep her healthy for as long as she chooses to stay with me. So
yeah, I'm gonna use 2 things of yours here. I'm gonna make a note of both because I'm gonna, steal them and credit you. Invented drama and somewhere between 11 and dead. That's how I'm going to describe myself from now on. When people ask me how old I am, I'm no longer going to say I'm 71. I'll say, somewhere between 11 and dead. I love that. And then when they say, what have you learned in your lifetime? And I'll say that, not to dwell on invented drama. So that'll be that's my 2 new catchphrases. I'm somewhere between 11 and dead, and the one thing I've learned is not to dwell on invented drama. So
thank you so much.
That's a big takeaway. That's your next book title, is somewhere between 11 and dead, and I'll read that one.
Okay,
hey, so
I'll do it.
Let's talk about your day.
Sure.
7 minutes to get up. Just tell us what it looks like. Tell us what your world looks like. It's a snapshot right now. Where are you at? I mean, you're sitting here talking to me. Everything looks nice. I see a photograph. By the way, I want to get into your photography here. So we're going to go there next. Let's talk about photography. But first, let's do this 11, where you are on your own 11 to dead chart.
Sure. So I have Alexa home stuff. And so I tell her to turn on my coffee pot.
Yeah.
She wakes me up. I tell her to turn on the coffee pot. So I have a lot of automation that happens. I use Alexa to turn fans on and lights on, and that's energy saving for me. No, hush.
So your little helper there. That's not the cat, right?
No, that's not the cat's actually deaf. So that's become a big challenge in life, because I can sneak up on my cat in my 468-pound power wheelchair. And so I have a ceiling track lift that I use to get me out of bed, and an adjustable bed that will sit me up. Yeah, I no longer have the abdominal muscles, so I can move forward. But if I get all the way flat, I'm unable to sit up from there. Yeah. And I use my lift to go and pick me up and put me onto my wheelchair. Yeah. I can still do my hygiene routine. I have enough strength to transfer onto the toilet. Stuff that people with wheelchairs talk about all the time, that the whole rest of the world doesn't, which I find very odd that ends up being part of my conversation in life. That's actually where I get dressed, because there's a grab bar next to the toilet mounted onto the wall, and I can use it to support my arm and then move around. All of the other sink related things, I brace my elbows. But once I'm on my power chair for the day, I'm here. Yeah. So I'll do a little bit of twitching and a little bit of rearranging and stuff, a little bit of squiggling in my chair, a little bit of scooting. I microwave my food. Everything is pre-prepared for me. I have a very small refrigerator because it's difficult to open big refrigerator doors. I have a lap board that my laptop computer sits on. I pull it into my lap to type. I can still type. Yeah. But with my phone, I do speech to text just because it's easier. My thumbs don't bend. I don't know if you can, that weirdness. And so it's not that the joints don't work. The joints work fine, but I don't have the muscle control. I'm losing those pieces. But because I am a big believer in get the assistive technology that you need,
Yes.
that's what I know how to do, is when it becomes too difficult to type, I'll transition to doing something else. But everything was pre-set up for me. My fiance set up my whole bookcase in the background. And I looked at this morning, I'm like, where are all my books? Like, I had all of these books up there that were lovely background. He's like, we sold them in New Orleans when you spoke at that conference. Oh yeah, right. We just did that. And so I have a personal care assistant who comes in the afternoons and cooks and cleans and puts my compression socks on and does foot hygiene and that kind of stuff. And I watch TV with my cat when in the evening. That's kind of her jam. She's like, okay, Mom, it's like 8 o'clock, time to watch television. So, and we snuggle and I watch television for a while and then I go to bed.
How do you do sitting in your chair all day? I remember, I've had some people that I've helped who have been in bed a lot. And, if you didn't turn them a bit from now and again, there was all sort of issues with bed sores, that sort of thing, infection and all the rest. And I'm wondering how on a continuing basis you do with that.
Sorry for the whole nose thing. I have a cat hair up my nose.
No problem.
So I actually have a very special cushion that I sit on. Have you ever sat on a donut because of surgery?
Yeah, I know what we're talking about.
So my cushion actually has a well like that in it, so that I don't have any pressure on my sitting bones.
Sure.
And my power wheelchair tilts and reclines and elevates so I can reach things. And so I have a very specialized wheelchair. That it was very difficult to get insurance to pay for.
Yeah.
In fact, this most recent wheelchair, they said, okay, you're entitled to tilt. So if you make your hand be like an L, can you do that? Because you're going to do that easier than I am. So if you make your hand like an L, and then you're going to tip backward. So from the wrist, I'm not going to make my point. Let's see if I can make my point with my phone. Okay, nope. Ha ha ha. Yay, awesomeness. Okay, so tilt goes this way.
Yeah, I see that.
Right. And then recline opens up the backrest so that I can stretch. Right. And so insurance said I was entitled to tilt but not recline. So they wanted me locked in 90 degrees all day long, which is completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
And I had to fight my insurance company to get them to agree that I needed recline so that I wouldn't get pressure sores. We actually had to do this whole pressure mapping thing, so they could see the pressure differences and then agree that I needed recline and I needed a specialized cushion.
Yeah.
Just to keep me healthy.
Yeah.
Right? I've been really fortunate that I still have full sensation. And so I can feel everything that's going on with me. I know if I'm sitting on a wrinkle in my dress, or I know, and so I can get those things changed. And so I've had spots that have hurt, but I haven't ever developed a full-on pressure sore about those. So yeah, there's a lot of squiggling and a lot of high-tech equipment.
In the course of a day, like we're talking now, I don't know who else in the house, you have somebody helping you come in and help out and so forth, but in the event that you need some additional assistance, what's the procedure? Who do you call, or what do you do?
If I need emergency help,
or even not an emergency, just something unexpected happens and it doesn't fit in with the routine and you're stuck somehow.
I have friends
nearby enough to dip in and out.
Yeah, I have a whole group of people locally that if something weird happens, like hey, I unplugged something.
Yeah.
Right. And so I have neighbors that I can call who will come in and do that. My dad lives a mile away.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's 83 and has Parkinson's. And so
I get it.
There's kind of a challenge there.
Yeah.
He still really wants to help.
Yes.
But I limit the things that I ask him to do.
Yeah.
Right. But I still have a great circle of friends. I have a ramp that, so I get out of my house.
Yeah.
I still drive. So that's awesome. I get to go out and about and do things. And You know, and I've let the hope and the choice for joy override how I think I'm perceived out in public.
Hmm.
I used to not like to go to restaurants because I'm aware of how it looks. And now I just stopped caring about that.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to choose.
Yeah.
So.
When you look at your dad's situation and yours, and my friend with muscular dystrophy that I confused with the terminology there, but when you look at healthcare systems, the US and problems with insurance companies, and then the UK, it's not just I was corrected the other day after a comment on Facebook that I had made in some post about a single payer system, and somebody wrote back very knowledgeably saying the real problem with the UK is it's a single provider system, and that's where all the inefficiencies and the horror comes in. Canada, I think, is both single payer and single provider. The state is in charge of everything, which means they're sort of unanswerable because there's no appeal. And I've been reading a lot about, the whole move in Canada. Something really jumped out at me the other day where someone said, well, there's a lot less paperwork to fill in for the euthanasia program than there is for getting assistance with disability. And that really boggled my mind, because the same is happening in Belgium and Holland now, where assisted suicide is now going in, becoming much more widespread. And people are starting to say the state knows which side its bread is buttered on, because of course it costs far less for a single provider system to help people in that direction. And there's so much discussion in so many different circles about this stuff. And it just seems to me that you would have an insight, not into that particular thing that I read, but just your life is so full and meaningful to everyone around you. You're the author of this book and so forth and so on. And I wonder what your perspective is in terms of what's happening in places like Canada and Belgium and other countries that have sort of crossed the Rubicon when it comes to seeing one of the ways to deal with disability is simply, a kind of a terminal solution in their programs. And when you read about that stuff from your perspective, and I'm not trying to feed you any line or position, I'm just curious if that is something you've given any thought to, and if so, what?
I have not given any big thought to it because I haven't really heard about it. You're bringing it up. I find that horrifying.
Yeah.
What I remember from 2020 and the medical challenges that we faced then is that providers were deciding that people who were severely disabled had worse lives and therefore didn't necessarily need to be prioritized. Well, who are you to decide that I have a worse life than you?
Right.
My dad actually said, well, you're more disabled than I am.
Yeah.
And because I'm his daughter, I said, are you sure?
Yeah.
Like, really, Dad, are you sure? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, I've had my disability longer, but that means I've had more time to figure things out. Right? I know how to work around opening the lid of a takeout container that doesn't use my teeth. Okay, like I know all of the tricks, and so that doesn't make me. I'm less disabled because I know the cheat codes for life. I find when people lose hope, they choose to no longer be with us because they've lost hope, they've lost sight, and I've been in that dark place, so I know. I speak from experience. Right? I have been in I'm done. I cannot do this anymore. And so I know the pain and the darkness of that. Had I had access, I still don't think I would have done it. But for a healthcare system to decide that was the best opportunity for me, that was the best decision for me, it is to me a horrifying thought. Just horrifying. Can I just stand on Horrifying.
Yeah, horrifying is good. I'm wondering, it brings up something, and I'm going to wrap it up in a minute. We're talking with Heather Markham and her book, Rough Waters, and you could also retitle it Deep Waters, because we're talking about the biggest issues there are, somewhere between 11 and dead. And we are, and this is not invented drama. This is real drama, and not self-chosen. But I'm just curious about how you see just the word disability and a sort of on a continuum. I think, we all live in this crazy youth-oriented culture. Even aging is no good. We've got to all stay young somehow. There's huge aspects of the medical profession directed to, what amounts to all kinds of cosmetic procedures. And I don't mean just literal cosmetic, but all the self-care industry, the whole bit. It's very kind of unrealistic, it seems to me. I'm 71. I'm obviously closer to death than I was when I was 21. And you look back on your life and you don't feel the most important thing is to stay looking any particular way or whatever. Other things loom much bigger in terms of your relationships with people, for instance, are far more important to me than how I look or how young or old I am. It takes a while to understand that's where things are. But I'm just curious how you see the continuum of health and illness, disability and ability. I don't think these terms really mean very much. And I'm just curious what your perspective is on all that. How do you see that? Because you've written a book about your passage, I guess, as a disabled person in one way, but in reading Rough Waters, you don't come across as disabled to me, or even while we're talking now, irrespective of how long it takes you to get out of bed. I know a lot of people who can get out of bed in 10 seconds, but they seem far more disabled to me than you are. And I don't know how to put that, but that's my impression. I mean, you don't come across as someone who's disabled. And I don't mean anything about that physically. I'm just talking about life wisdom, coping, understanding what the big strokes are, all the stuff that I'd want in someone I'm depending on for some wisdom and guidance. Whether, being in a wheelchair or not is beside the point. But it just seems our whole culture measures people in this insane sort of way of aging and disability. And, I'm going on too long, but I guess you get the gist of my question. And I'd like you to talk to me about that.
Sure. So I find that what labels me as disabled is society. The barriers that get put up or don't get removed are what disables me. I live in a place where the curb ramp out of my driveway is very steep, so I put a little ramp bump in there, right, to make it better. Someone took it, which I found exceedingly rude, and then I couldn't leave my home. I could not get out of my driveway, and that was disabling. We live in a very able-bodied, youth-oriented, as you said, able-bodied oriented society. So, but we are all on this spectrum of disability, right? We are all aging, and as we age, we become less able than we were when we were younger.
Right.
We become more disabled in our own conditions, but choosing to approach life angry or sad or narrow or closed is more disabling than a power wheelchair.
Yes.
And so for me, I just need to work on the things that I can work on, right? Which means inventing new ways to do things, right? And not choosing to let things become so much that I can't function. Yeah, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Here's my little secret. You ready? This is my big giant ruler. Okay. You know what this big giant ruler does? It pokes the button that turns on my monitor. Okay. Because I can't reach it anymore.
Right.
Now I could choose to not have a big monitor. That's my choice, but I like to have a big monitor. It makes things easier. for me. I can see my screens better. I can write better because I can see what I'm going on. I can have this conversation easier. But if you take that away, then that communication link has become disabled.
Yeah.
The terms ability and disability are very strange in this culture, and differently abled is a thing that just makes me want to like light my hair on fire.
Yeah.
My cousin used it, and I said, "Could we just not use differently abled?" And she's like, "Oh, I was just trying to find a softer term." I'm like, "Are you Serena Williams?"
Yeah.
She's like, "No, I'm not Serena Williams." I'm like, "Then you are differently abled than Serena Williams. So let's just stop using differently abled when you mean that that person doesn't have the same neurocognitive abilities." Okay, let's say that there's a neurocognitive disability, right? Different. So there's kind of, I hate the word ableism, but it's related to ageism.
Sure.
Right? And so the public expectation that I'm going to be able to perform like Serena Williams is unreal. It's unrealistic, right? And Zoom culture, very much so, has actually made the wheelchair disappear. Like, unless you see that I don't scratch my nose the same way, right? I look as able-bodied as the next person.
Yeah.
Because we're all seen from, the chest up.
Yeah.
Okay. If I move enough so that you can see the headrest on my power wheelchair, you might go, "Oh, that's just a chair with a big headrest." Like, you wouldn't necessarily be aware. And so there's been a little bit of leveling.
Yes.
In that instance, which is kind of nice. Yeah, all that stuff just kind of rubs me the wrong way. But it's that whole Yankee thing. I just kind of, I own it. And so,
and finding a better word doesn't fix anything.
No, it really,
I love how we're
doesn't.
supposed to come up with these new words, and then if you don't use the right word or the right this or that or the other, you're somehow a less sensitive person. So all you've got to do is learn how to speak correctly, and everybody will think you're a nice guy. I want to get into the photography here for a minute. Sure. First of all, I don't want to make work for my producer, Ernie Gregg, but it seems to me that if we can get some of your photography, we can edit some of that into the video version of this, or put a book of your photography, so to speak, pages at the end or whatever. So Ernie, let's try to do that. Tell us a little bit about your journey as a photographer. When did you start taking pictures, and what do you take pictures of, and how did that all work? Did you ever shoot film? Has it always been digital? Just talk photography for a minute.
Sure. So I got my first camera when I was 10.
Okay, so you shot
film. I shot film. I took it to Girl Scout camp, right? And I was like, "Ooh, this is cool," because I really wanted to capture, artistically represent the world around me. And a pencil and paper, I was just so frustrated that my skill level didn't meet what I was seeing. And I actually wanted like a quick fix. So a camera gave me that, except that in the old days, it was film. And so you shot it and you had no idea what you had.
Right.
But I loved shooting film. I found darkroom work when I was in college. And there's just magic in a darkroom. Okay. I'm one of those weirdos who loves the smell of Dektol, which is actually the chemical you use to develop paper. Everyone's like, "Smells like rotten eggs." I'm like, "Smells like magic." I'm sorry. That's just kind of my perspective on life. I had a darkroom built in my garage. My boyfriend at the time said, "Sure, I'll do this if you teach me how to use it." And so I shot film way out into 2006,
right?
Even though I had a digital camera. There's a photo behind me.
I see the one there.
Red. That actually was taken on film. It's a selfie from 1992 that I took in a reflective building in downtown Tampa. And the security guard came out and he's like, "You can't be here because this is a private building and you're violating things." I was like, "Public sidewalk."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm gonna call the cops." And I'm like, "Go ahead."
Yeah.
So I still feel like that 20-something standing tall, hair blowing in the wind, not caring. I only took 2 photos. I have the negatives. I only took 2.
Hmm.
And one of them turned out to be perfect.
Hmm.
I made the switch from film over to digital as soon as digital really became available. And we
Yeah.
paid $1,000 for a digital camera in 2000. That was a lot of money. That was my graduation present from
Yeah.
getting a master's degree. And what I liked about that camera is that the body rotated from the lens.
Hmm. Hmm.
So now I had a little bit different perspective. And the switch over to digital, I've continued to need that screen moving because I can't hold a camera to my face anymore. I shoot everything out of my lap. So even Frank, if you and I were to go out with cameras, we still wouldn't have the same perspective.
No.
I'm going to shoot from like 28 inches off the ground, or wherever my knees end up at.
Yeah.
And you're going to shoot from your eye level.
Hmm.
And so I don't do a lot of portraits because things tend to end up people's noses, and that's just not a flattering angle on anybody. I like the quiet of shooting nature. When I'm out, and I've done a ton of bird photography lately that's been shown exhibited in Barcelona. That I don't listen to audiobooks or anything. I don't listen to music. I just want to listen to the quiet. So I listen for the birds, and I'm like, oh, there you are today. Hi. And so I just kind of go around and I look, and I like to watch the progress of nesting herons and see the babies fledge and that kind of stuff. So I've had some award-winning stuff that I'm very city culture oriented. There's a black and white over my head that's actually I call wheelchair gladiators.
Yeah, which I can just see in the thing, but we'll put it up where people can really see it if you'll accommodate us.
I will absolutely do that. That took a 3rd place in a motion category. And it's wheelchair rugby. And so getting to represent sport. And so different things, gymnasts, and I like to watch people's bodies work the way they're intended to work. I love to watch gymnastics. I love to watch high performing athletes because I'm inspired by the beauty of how they move. I like to watch ordinary people do things that my body doesn't do anymore, like stand on their toes. I'm like, oh, I find that really fascinating. So I'm fascinated by the world around me. And I just photograph everything.
Well, let me ask you to work with Ernie, our producer, to put together a show that can go with the video version of this.
Thank you.
And Ernie's, you've fallen into the right hands here because Ernie is a brilliant designer. He and I did a book together many years ago that's an online interactive book called Letter to Lucy, which Ernie put several thousand photographs and illustrations into it. And it was one of the first interactive things that Apple ever did. I think at the time was the most sophisticated thing they had online. And Ernie designed and did everything. So Ernie, when you have a chance, please follow up with Heather and let's do something fun here. I don't know what we can intercut with the interview itself or what we can put at the end, but let's show her photographs, most of all because I want to see them. So I can, speaking of the world of Zoom. So Heather, everybody, rough waters. I'm going to sound very stupid here, but is this an advanced copy? Is this the actual book? Is it out? Can people get it?
The book's out.
Yes, good.
It's available everywhere books are sold.
Good.
The photo on the cover is a photo that I took.
I love it. It's somebody in a water slide.
Yeah, I call it Tiki Water Slide because he's in a thong bathing suit.
Yeah, I know. I could see that, and it probably doesn't translate very well here, but maybe Ernie will stick a picture of the book into your photo exhibit, and at the same time we will be able to look. I love that picture, by the way. It's trying to show it this way is hard, but we'll put it in the show.
Thank you.
So hey, listen, Heather, thank you so much for the book. Thank you for your time. And please stay in touch with us so we can follow you. And we'll start by doing a nice show of your photographs on all our whatever it is we do out there, all our
Thank
stuff.
you very much. I have had a fantastic time. I have to admit, I was super nervous.
Well, I've enjoyed myself
Coming
very
in.
much talking with you. Really lovely. It's a privilege. It really is. And I can't wait to see a good show of your photographs that Ernie will put together. He's writing a huge will do in capitals, 3 exclamation points. So you have one of the best graphic designers out there now in your stable of implement.
Fantastic.
All right. Well,
Thank
much
you.
love to you.
And to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.